So BCSEA is a member-supported association of practitioners, activists, supporting sustainable energy policy, innovation, and education in BC. We have a vision of a 100% sustainably powered BC, and our mission is to advance energy literacy in BC. So please join us if you have any inclination in that direction. Your membership strengthens us as an organization and allows us to speak more forcefully to governments and the BC Utilities Commission. BCSEA was founded way back in 2004 by ecofuturist Guy Dauncey to address a vacuum in advocacy for sustainable energy. And our current activities include education, networking, public outreach, advocacy and policy development, and BC Utilities Commission interventions. One of our flagship educational effort is the COOLIT Climate Leadership Training Program, which is free for elementary and high school classes. It consists of in-class or currently virtual, I guess, workshops and take-home climate challenges, and includes greenhouse gas impact assessment from the activities of the students that we get them to undertake, putting pressure on their parents to reduce energy use in their homes and stuff like that, and their prizes and like. Results for this past year in COOLIT, we were in about 248 classes, reached 5,779 students, about 27,000 student actions were recorded, and an estimated 1,587 tons of greenhouse gas emissions avoided. Another thing we do is webinars on topical issues. In the past, we've hosted Energy Connections, an annual networking conference for sustainable energy practitioners. That was pre-COVID. Not sure what we're going to do to fill that gap going forward, but stay tuned. One current campaign we have is Switch It Up BC. This is a public awareness campaign on greenhouse gas emissions and health issues associated with using natural gas in homes. And we have a system for support and pledging for homeowners to switch to heat pumps and electric cooking. And the image here is a sticker that you can get and paste on your existing furnace to remind you that when it blows up, don't switch like for like, move to an electric heat pump. Our BCSEA's Vancouver chapter has run Women in Sustainable Energy annual networking event. Victorians for Transportation Choice, in the last two local government elections, the BCSEA Victoria chapter teamed up with a bunch of other transportation groups and sent out candidate surveys on sustainable transportation. We've got very good participation by candidates, lots of, especially in the core areas, more than 50% participation. And in 2018, we had about 17,000 website visits during the election period. So on people's radar. Here's one of our early forays into the energy policy. Back in the 2005 BC general election, we produced our sustainable policies for BC, 28 sustainable energy policy proposals, including carbon tax, declining cap on fossil fuel production, fee baits to incent the purchase of efficient vehicles and disincent the purchase of gas guzzlers. So moving to the state of energy and climate policy in BC today, I'm going to say that we have quite progressive commitments by the BC government, and the point we're at is struggling with big challenges of implementation. So we have legislated greenhouse gas emissions reduction targets, which are in line with the scientific evidence. We have the Clean BC Climate Action Plan and the Roadmap to 2030, which together identify where the government means to find the greenhouse gas emission savings and to a large extent how it proposes to achieve them. We've got the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Regulation, affectionately known as GGRR, and this enables the government to order the BC Utilities Commission to allow utilities to make spending on electrification, EV charging, renewable natural gas, and similar initiatives. A bit more about that in a couple of slides. We've got the Renewable and Low Carbon Fuel Requirements Regulation, which specifies a maximum carbon intensity for liquid fuels, and this is a declining cap, so it's going to be ratcheted up as time goes by. Zero Emissions Fuel Act, pushing vehicle dealers in BC towards zero emission vehicles, electric vehicles mainly. And BC Energy Step Code for buildings. You've got the carbon tax, annual progress reporting, planning for adaptation to climate change, and some initial work to define a green economy so that we can figure out an alternative to producing and exporting all those fossil fuels. So a bit more about the roadmap to 2030. Key features include the promise by the government to legislate a hard cap on the greenhouse gas emissions from the customers of BC's natural gas utilities. This would be about a 47% reduction in emissions from those utilities, or about 6 megatons per year. So this is significant. The government has not yet brought in the legislation. If you're of a mind to put pressure on the government, like writing in or talking to the minister or whatever, this would probably be a good topic to steal their resolve on and push them forward to make progress on it. Another thing is the government's commitment that renewable natural gas should make up at least 15% of the gas deliveries by 2030. And this is a very significant indication of how the government means to achieve the greenhouse gas reduction targets. And we've got a promise of a clean energy, clean transportation plan. Consultations are happening now. Another opportunity to make your views known to the government. And finally, the government has promised to put carbon pollution standard into the BC Building Code, which is very significant for local governments who want to green their planning and green their buildings, specifically supporting a switch off of natural gas to electric for space and water heating. So to its credit, the government has also got an accountability mechanism, and the government's own accountability report says that their modeling demonstrates that BC's climate action plan will achieve 97% of the 2030 greenhouse gas emissions reduction targets, which is pretty good according to their account. Also, to their credit is that they have struck a council, a watchdog council, the Climate Solutions Council, which has also produced its report of the government's actions. And here we see a little bit more skeptical picture. So they're saying success, these are selected quotes, and it's like success is threatened, but in areas where policy development and implementation is proceeding too slowly. And relevant to transportation, continued growth of medium and heavy duty emissions will eclipse the gains made by zero emissions low duty vehicles. So there you go. This is challenging work, and the government is challenged. So to the BC Utilities Commission and their role in implementing energy climate policy through regulation. Regulation of energy utilities in BC is what is called economic regulation. The focus is mostly on making sure that ratepayers get safe, reliable energy at reasonable cost. And this is a quasi-judicial process. There are formal processes for utilities to apply to the Utilities Commission to set their rates, to make capital expenditures, to extend their lines, or a whole bunch of other things that the Commission oversees. There are formal rules for interveners to participate in a proceeding, mostly ratepayers or ratepayer groups. There are formal rules of evidence. Usually people get legal counsel to represent them because it is really complex. And the hearing takes place in front of a panel of commissioners who review the evidence and make a decision. So in terms of a selection of some of the legal parameters the commission must consider, the BCUC must consider BC's energy objectives in the Clean Energy Act, including reducing greenhouse gas emissions in BC, encouraging fuel switching to lower carbon fuels and the like. But BCUC must allow a utility to recover in its rates the costs of any prescribed activities undertaken under the greenhouse gas reductions regulation. And these activities include incenting the use of compressed natural gas and liquefied natural gas to replace diesel fuel in transportation, for example, acquiring renewable natural gas, hydrogen, syngas, or lignin to displace fossil natural gas in the gas system. And this is a key part of the government's strategy to decarbonize energy use. Incenting customers to use electricity instead of fossil fuels, and installing EV public charging stations. So so basically what this means is that the government is keeping a pretty tight rein on the commission. The government's the one who is mainly in charge of making policy and implementing policy. They're not giving a great deal of discretion to the BCUC on this. So there's a bit of a digression. The BCSEA is very interested in demand side management. In other words, energy conservation and energy efficiency. And when we go in front of the commission, we're arguing strongly that the utilities should do more energy conservation. They should, and the utilities are required to address DSM in their long-term planning, but they do have discretion over how much DSM spending and savings they will target in relation to all the other resources they acquire. So the BC Utilities Commission is required to follow detailed rules to assess the adequacy and cost effectiveness of these demand side management plans that the utilities propose. The commission is more or less required to approve a DSM plan that is shown to be cost effective. But as I noticed above, persuading the utility to plan for more rather than less DSM is not something that is prescribed by law. It's something that you have to pressure them to do. So this is me and Bill Andrews. Bill Andrews is the lawyer for BCSEA, and I'm the policy analyst and consultant, and together we are the BCSEA's intervention team. We've been working at this for 18 years, over 300 interventions, and we're speaking for the public interest in sustainable energy and for our BCSEA members who want the energy they receive from the utilities to be sustainably produced. And why do we intervene? Well, this is a place we can directly influence the BC Utilities Commission decisions and the utilities actions. And this is, direct change in how the utilities procure energy conservation, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and so on. It's where the rubber meets the road for the utilities. We want to make sure that the green perspective is heard at the BC Utilities Commission. We use the knowledge we gain from interventions to speak to government, utilities, the public, and our members from a position that is well informed about the utilities issues. And finally, we engage with other groups, residential, commercial, industrial customers, unions, and First Nations. Highlights of what we've achieved. Usually what we've achieved is not very spectacular, but I pulled out the most spectacular thing we've done. 2005 to 2007, we helped to defeat a proposed 295 megawatt gas-fired power plant that BC Hydro wanted to procure and site at Duke Point on Vancouver Island. And as a result of the defeat of that power plant, we helped to shift the government policy away from gas-fired electricity generation, which had been the main policy, and onto renewables. Also, over the years, we've gained recognition from the BC Utilities Commission that green ratepayers are a legitimate interest group who are interested in more than just low utility bills. So right now, with the current energy and policy situation, the BC Utilities Commission is facing some really big decisions. How much to electrify and how much to use decarbonized gas. The government finally supports switching gas loads to electricity after many years of being fuel neutral. However, it's a challenge to electrify everything because gas currently supplies about 2/3 of BC's winter peak energy loads. Another big choice is what to accept as a decarbonized fuel. Should out-of-province renewable natural gas delivered by displacement be considered fair game to inject into BC's gas system? Should blue or turquoise hydrogen be considered sufficiently green? Would it be okay to couple gray hydrogen and natural gas with carbon offsets in order to deem that to be a decarbonized fuel? How much hydrogen can be mixed into the grid safely and effectively? And some big challenges we're facing in implementing an energy switch: affordable energy bills, political must; developing cheap, abundant, renewable electricity, renewable gas and/or hydrogen; developing cheap electricity capacity to address peak loads; and of course, reconciliation with First Nations groups and their desire to participate in the energy transition. So on to electric vehicle charging issues at the BC Utilities Commission. Public EV charging stations are a prescribed undertaking under the greenhouse gas reductions regulation. So the utilities are mandated by government that they may recover their costs from ratepayers. The provincial policy is for BC Hydro and Fortis BC to seed the public EV charging network in BC. The roadmap to 2030 talks about BC's electric highway and an intention to have 10,000 EV charging stations by 2030. And I'm pretty sure that means public participation as well. The utilities are not going to develop all those. Right at the moment, BC Hydro has 110 EV DC fast charging stations at 77 sites along most major highways. And Fortis BC has 40 EV stations at 22 sites in its service territory in South Central BC. Avoiding cross-subsidy between classes of ratepayers is a very big concern for the BC Utilities Commission, coming from its economic regulator approach. Also, the Commission has expressed a concern about avoiding having the regulated utilities outcompete would-be private providers of EV charging services. So that affects how it regulates the initiatives of BC Hydro and Fortis to provide an EV charging network. So in 2020, Fortis BC applied for EV DC fast charging rates with a time-based billing based on making a forecast of full recovery of all costs from people who use the DC chargers over a 10 to 13-year period. And this was approved by the BC Utilities Commission. However, in 2021, BC Hydro came forward with quite a similar rate application to the BC Utilities Commission. However, they acknowledged that they would require short-term subsidy of their rates by other ratepayers, and this was rejected by the BC Utilities Commission. BC Hydro must now submit a new application this year for a rate that will not require any cross-subsidy. More issues: accessibility for persons with disabilities. Many EV charging stations have accessibility problems due to curbs, hard to handle cables, and other things. And the BCSEA, along with the Vancouver EV Association, managed to get the BCUC to confirm that accessibility for persons with disabilities is an element of the quality of service for EV charging stations. And this hopefully will put a little bit more pressure on BC Hydro and Fortis to upgrade their stations, many of which are not fully accessible to people with disabilities. Peak load. Both Fortis and BC Hydro are now acknowledging that peak loads from electric vehicle charging are going to be increasing significantly in the near future and will threaten to contribute to the utilities' overall peak loads. And the consequence of that would be the requirement for expensive additional infrastructure and or generation facilities. So both BC Hydro and Fortis are working on on rates methods to shift electric vehicle charging off the peak periods and onto the non-peak periods. BC Hydro's approach is what is known as a time of use rate, and that's what you see pictured here. They are going to apply to the Commission for permission to charge a premium of 5 cents per kilowatt hour on residential customers consuming energy during the peak period, and then a credit of 5 cents per kilowatt hour for energy produced, energy drawn during the off-peak periods, which is late in the night. Fortis BC, meanwhile, is taking a different approach, a software-based demand response, which they're going to pilot. This means actual software attached to the electric vehicle charger. The customer would volunteer to accept this, but having done so, the machinery would automatically interrupt charging during peak periods, and so hopefully reduce the overall peak load for the utilities. Okay, yes. If you heard the last week's throne speech, new legislation will also improve access to electric vehicle charging stations in condo buildings. No details provided, and it's too soon to say if that will be a BC Utilities Commission issue, but I think we all are aware that getting EV charging into condos is a significant issue. Measurement Canada's work on metering dollar per kilowatt hour billing. The BCUC is pressuring both Hydro and Fortis to implement dollar per kilowatt hour billing as opposed to their current approach of per meter billing. Under the federal law, energy-based billing must use Measurement Canada approved meters. However, the appropriate standards for DC metering have not yet been set, and accordingly, there are no approved DC fast charging meters. However, per meter billing and flat fee billing is allowed. So Measurement Canada is now offering a temporary dispensation for commercial level 1 and 2 EV charging station operators to use non-compliant meters with $1 per kilowatt hour billing until 2030. Measurement Canada is also working on terms for commercial DC fast charging and also for non-commercial electric vehicle charging stations. BCSEA advocates that Measurement Canada do this work quickly so that customers can use dollar per kilowatt hour billing. However, we advocate that the marketplace, not Measurement Canada, should decide whether a service operator will offer dollar per kilowatt hour billing or allow per minute or flat fee billing. Another problem is that Measurement Canada's current terms require a very stringent indemnification for any operator who seeks to get a temporary dispensation to use a non-compliant meter for dollar per kilowatt hour billing. And we think that needs to be rectified unnecessary. So in conclusion, lots of good commitments made, lots of work being done on implementation, lots more challenges ahead to fully achieve our sustainable energy transition. And so lots more work is still there for sustainable energy advocates like BCSEA or the Victoria EVA Association.